All right, boys and girls, today we are in grammar. We're on lesson 19 and we're looking at some similes and metaphors. Again, just a reminder that the reason we are taking time to look at these different lessons in grammar is that these are kind of like tricks that authors, meaning writers, sometimes use in their writing. And you can see here, why do authors include similes and metaphors? Well, it helps readers to imagine what one thing is like by comparing it to something else. So we're comparing two things. And why do they do that? Well, it helps readers picture what is being described by showing how two things are alike in some way. But why are we worried about that? Well, remember, our goal is that maybe as writers, we can now do some of these things. So let's take a look at some similes and metaphors. First, we need to know, what is a simile? So it's a comparison, and it uses the words like or as. Take a look at these two similes. Let's look at the first one. So this is number 1 right here. Alicia's dog, Ollie, has paws as big as dinner plates. Wow. Well, I can tell that's a simile because it uses the words like or as. So I know that we're talking about his paws, and they are as big as dinner plates. So what does that mean? Well, that means that he has very big paws. You can see that right here. Let's look at example number 2. His bark sounds like thunder. So here is the comparison, sounds like thunder. And now I want you to think, what two things are they comparing? Well, his bark to thunder. So what does this mean? It means that this dog, Ollie, has a very loud bark. So then what's the difference between a simile and a metaphor? Well, similes, we said, use the words like or as, and a metaphor compares two things without using the words like or as. So let's take a look at this example. We'll number this like sentence number 3. Ollie is a mountain of a dog. Do you see how they just called Ollie by something else? They compared Ollie to a mountain, but they didn't use the words like or as, so it's slightly different. But we still have a pretty good idea of the size of Ollie thinking about this comparison. He is a very large dog because we know mountains are very large. So let's take a look at a few examples we're going to do together. And in each example, we have to first identify the simile or the metaphor, and then think about the two things that are being compared. So I'm going to underline the two things that are being compared, and then I'm going to write what that simile or metaphor means. So let's look at example number 1 first. Ollie's mouth was a trap that held a giant stick. I don't hear the words like or as, so it must be a metaphor. His mouth was a trap. This is a metaphor. It's comparing what? Right, Ollie's mouth to a trap. Well, if we know that traps typically like hold things in place or keep them secure, then what is it that he's holding? A giant stick. So I think this sentence means that he will not let go of the stick. He's got it trapped there in his mouth. Let's look at the next example. Ollie leapt toward Alicia like a clumsy ballerina. Is this a simile or a metaphor? Right, this is a simile because it uses the words like or as. Like a clumsy ballerina. That makes this sentence a simile. Now, I want you to think to yourself, what two things are they comparing? They're not comparing Alicia to anything. They're still comparing Ollie. What are they comparing him to? Right, a clumsy ballerina. So if we think of a clumsy ballerina and we think of Ollie, who we know now is a dog, how would we describe the meaning of this sentence? Right, he is not very graceful. We know that typically ballerinas are known for being very graceful, and if he is being compared to a clumsy ballerina, then he must be the exact opposite. Moving right along, let's look at example number 3. Go ahead and read that one to yourself and see if you can determine if this is a simile or a metaphor. Right, this is a simile because we use the words like or as, like a strong wind. Now I want you to think to yourself, what two things in this sentence are being compared? Right, in this sentence we're comparing Ollie, still the dog, but what are we comparing him to? Right, a strong wind. So what does this mean about Ollie? What do we know about strong winds? They're very fast, that's right. So we know that he is fast and strong. I'm using the word strong since they called him a strong wind. Take a look at the last example. Go ahead and do the same thing. Is this a simile or a metaphor? Right, in this last example, we can tell that this is a metaphor because they tell me was a freight train. Well, a dog is not a freight train. A dog is a dog. So now think to yourself, what two things are they comparing in this metaphor? They're comparing Ollie to a freight train. Suddenly, Ollie was a freight train racing into the house. So what does this sentence or metaphor tell us about Ollie? What do you know about trains? Can they stop easily? Right, they're chugging along, they're moving pretty quickly. If he's racing into the house, then I think he was unstoppable. So I'm going to say he was fast. Maybe you said powerful. Maybe you said unstoppable. Any of those three words to describe Ollie would work. Today you have 5 multiple choice questions where you are going to read the sentence, and the sentence includes either a simile or a metaphor, and then you have to determine which of these meanings identifies with this simile or metaphor used in the sentence. Let me know if you have any questions. Great job today.